Greetings, everyone. This is Pastor Mock. This is the second lesson in a series recently begun. We are going through John Downham's book, The Cure for Unjust Anger. And last time we considered what anger is. We saw that it is an affection in which someone is moved to retaliate in response to a perceived injury or perceived injustice. We saw that there are three kinds of anger. There is a pre-fall anger, which is acceptable, and that is no longer the case for man. We live in a post-fall world, so there's also anger expressed sinfully. Before conversion, all anger expressed by an image bearer is sinful. But at conversion and before glorification, we have another kind of anger that can be expressed righteously, an anger that is being renewed as our affections and thoughts are being renewed and sanctified by the Spirit of the Lord. So this week we are in 2 episodes looking at the righteous anger. And Downham describes righteous anger in this way. It is a holy and reasonable desire for revenge against sin, provoked within us by just and necessary causes to punish the sins, so that God may be glorified, the parties amended, and God's judgment averted, not only from the offending party, but also from the church and the nation. So if you're asking Puritan John Downham, when is anger righteous? He summarizes it in this way. Anger is righteous when it is occasioned by a just cause. It is expressed in a godly manner. It is fixed on the proper object. It endures for the appropriate time. And it is directed toward holy ends. So, good anger, righteous anger, is against sin. It has a good reason behind its retaliation, behind its affection for revenge. It is expressed in a good way. There are good goals behind the anger, and it is expressed in a good time, or for the appropriate amount of time. Today we're looking just at the just cause for righteous anger. There are 3 just causes for righteous anger. The first one is you can be righteously angry when you have the glory of God as your cause. That is a just cause. And there are several examples of this. Obviously, every time God is angry, he does so for the sake of glorifying his name. Moses, as a spokesman of God, prophet of God, leader of the Israelites, he was justly angry for the glory of God when he, in Exodus 16, noticed the grumbling Israelites. They disobeyed the order from the Lord to have the manna and to collect it and to consume it and not keep it for the next day. This angered Moses because the Israelites did not trust God. They did not glorify God by believing him to provide for them each and every day. There's also a just cause expressed by Moses for the glory of God when there was the golden calf incident in Exodus 32:32. That wicked act of idolatry that Aaron had a significant hand in was a just reason for Moses' hot anger. Obviously, idolatry defames the name of God, and Moses was righteously angry because of their idolatry. Another just cause is the unjust personal injury. So someone attacks you unjustly. You ought to be righteously angry at that. Moses is another example of this against Korah and those many men that came up against Moses. Paul copying Jesus, Paul in Acts 23, 2 and 3, and Jesus in John 18, 23. Here we have examples of both of them being struck in the face or in the mouth and becoming then righteously angry. Paul even called Ananias a whitewashed wall and said, God is going to strike you for what you just did to a man whose conscience is clean and who is only doing things, giving the gospel to glorify God. We see also this in Calvin's life. I am recently been going through Calvin's letter to the Cardinal Sadoleto, and Sadoleto was trying to convince the people in Geneva to return to the Church of Rome. And in his argument, he speaks of these wicked men, the reformers, who are leading those in Geneva astray. And Calvin says to Cardinal Sadoleto, if this was just against me, I could let it pass, but because I am connected to my ministry, this new covenant ministry, I'm going to defend what I've done, because by doing so, I am defending the glory of God. A third just cause is that of unjust injury of others. So Moses, we see this in Acts 7:24, recounting his involvement with the Israelites and their oppression under the hand of the Egyptians. He sees an Israelite brother, a slave who's being mistreated by an Egyptian, and he defends that slave by striking down the Egyptian. So he sees this oppression and, out of righteous anger, defends his brother, which results in the ending of the Egyptian's life. David was righteously angry when he heard of the account of Amnon and Amnon's rape of his sister Tamar, and of Absalom's hatred and anger towards Amnon, his brother, for doing that. The text in 2 Samuel 13:21 says, when King David heard of all these things, he was very angry. Nehemiah, in Nehemiah 5:6, also, he sees the economic inequality and the oppression of the poor, and he becomes righteously angry. So there are three just causes: the glory of God, the unjust personal injury of self, and the unjust injury of others, that ought to move someone to do something about that injustice. But Downham also mentions that there is need for this cause to be a serious cause. He reminds us that love covers many sins. 1 Corinthians 13:4 and 5 speaks about love being patient and not irritable, not easily irritated. You'll find that if you are easily irritated, you are preferring anger, unjust anger, to love. And so genuine love covers a multitude of sins, as we see in 1 Peter 4:8. So because of this fact, Downham says, you are righteously angry if this cause that you have is a serious one. It mustn't be a trifle. It mustn't be an insignificant matter. Consider Christ and his relationship to his disciples, who would every single day sin in thought, word, and deed. Does Jesus take every moment of the day to rebuke, to righteously, to show his righteous anger and confront every single action, word, thought of his disciples. No. He does address weightier sins, and you see that throughout his ministry. But his love for his disciples covers their sins. Ultimately, of course, that covering is found in the cross, where he pays for all of those sins of thought, word, and deed. It's right to be angry for these just causes. Every time you sin, you should be angry at your own sinfulness, at the fact that you broke God's law. In fact, a new covenant mercy found in a couple different places in Ezekiel is that you would abhor yourselves because you would see the sins that you commit over and over. We ought to be angry whenever sin is involved. We ought to be angry when the glory of God is being defamed. And so, a couple questions you can ask yourself, either in the heat of the anger, which is ideal, but less likely, because oftentimes at that point we are so overruled by our passions that we throw reason and captive thoughts to Christ out the window. A couple questions to ask before, or in the middle of, or in reflection on the episode of anger is, do I have a good reason to be angry? Was I angry because the glory of God was at stake, or because I was unjustly injured, or because someone else was unjustly injured? Like maybe those lives that are being murdered at Planned Parenthood. You have a good reason to be angry. And is this offense serious enough to require an action of anger? Does this offense put at risk a relationship? So if it's not resolved, then you and that person will be at odds with each other until there's a resolution. Well, then don't give the devil an opportunity for further division. You should use that anger to solve the problem. So those are just a couple questions. We'll look at more of this righteous anger next time. We'll consider how it's expressed in a godly manner and for appropriate time and directed towards holy ends. We'll see you then.